The notification pinged at exactly 9:47 p.m., just as I was settling into my third beer and wondering why the apartment felt so damn quiet. Working late again? Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at Eliza's text message, that familiar knot forming in my stomach. My wife had been working late a lot recently. Her new position in HR at Meridian Tech, the same company where I'd been grinding away as a systems analyst for 3 years, apparently demanded evening hours that stretched well past midnight. Sure thing, babe, I typed back. Get that overtime pay. Mark Halverson, dutiful husband. Mark Halverson, trusting fool. I clicked over to Instagram, mindlessly scrolling through the usual garbage. Food photos, gym selfies, political rants I'd learned to ignore. Then Julie's story popped up, and my world tilted sideways. There was my wife, pressed against some guy in a dimly lit booth, her manicured fingers tangled in his hair. The timestamp read 20 minutes ago. The location tag showed Velvet Lounge, definitely not our office building. But here's the thing that really made my chest tighten. I recognized the guy. Greg Stanton, my direct supervisor. The same Greg who'd been so concerned about my performance metrics lately. The same Greg who'd suggested Eliza might be better suited for a promotion she'd been eyeing. I screenshot the story before it could disappear. Then I screenshot it again, just to be sure. My phone buzzed with another text from Eliza. This project is so exhausting. Missing you. I set the phone down and walked to our bedroom, opening her dresser drawer. The little jewelry box where she kept her wedding ring when she did yoga was empty. She'd been wearing it when she left for work that morning. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. I grabbed another beer from the fridge and sat back down, staring at that screenshot. Julie had tagged it with laughing emojis and the caption, "When Bae thinks she's being sneaky." 23 months of marriage. 3 years at the same company. And this was how I found out. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared bank account. There it was, a charge from Velvet Lounge for $68, posted 2 hours ago. Right around the time Eliza was supposedly buried in spreadsheets and performance reviews. My systems analyst brain kicked into gear, the same methodical thinking that made me good at debugging code. If this was happening, there would be patterns, digital footprints, evidence. I opened a new document and started typing, timeline, Thursday, October 12th, 6:30 p.m., Eliza leaves for late meeting, 7:45 p.m., bank charge at Velvet Lounge, 9:25 p.m., Julie's Instagram story, 9:47 p.m., Eliza texts about working late. The beer tasted bitter now. I kept typing, documenting everything I could remember from the past few weeks. The mysterious phone calls she'd take in the bathroom, the new workout clothes, the way she'd started doing her makeup differently, more dramatic somehow. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Greg Stanton, that smug piece of garbage who wore suits that cost more than my monthly salary and talked about synergy in every meeting. He'd been particularly interested in my projects lately, asking detailed questions about systems I'd built, processes I'd streamlined. I'd thought he was finally recognizing my work. Turns out he was just gathering intel for when he pushed me out. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Omar, my only real friend at the office. "Dude, you see Julie's story? That's messed up." So other people were noticing. Great. Nothing like being the last to know about your own wife's affair, except for the part where everyone else gets to watch it unfold on social media. I typed back, "Yeah, I saw it." "You okay, man?" I stared at the question for a long time. Was I okay? No, I was definitely not okay. I was angry, humiliated, and rapidly calculating just how badly this could screw up my life. Eliza worked in HR. She had access to personnel files, performance reviews, disciplinary procedures. If she wanted to make my life miserable at work, she had all the tools she needed. But here's the thing about being a systems analyst. You learn to think in terms of vulnerabilities and exploits. You learn that every system has weaknesses, and every weakness can be leveraged if you're smart enough to find it. "I'm fine," I texted Omar back. "Just processing." I wasn't fine, but I was planning. I opened my email and started a new message to myself, attaching the screenshots. Subject line, insurance policy. Then I forwarded it to my personal Gmail account, just to be safe. Eliza came home at 1:30 a.m., slipping into bed like she always did after these late nights. She smelled like expensive cologne. Not the cheap stuff I wore, but something with notes of cedar and bergamot. Greg's cologne. I'd bet money on it. How was work? I asked quietly. Exhausting, she whispered, already turning away from me. That new compliance project is a nightmare. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing even out as she fell asleep. My wife, the liar, my boss, the predator, my co-workers, the audience. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. I pulled out my phone one more time and opened the company directory. Ms. Evans, head of human resources. Eliza's boss. A woman who'd built her reputation on running a tight ship and maintaining professional standards. I started typing an email. Ms. Evans, I need to bring a serious matter to your attention regarding inappropriate workplace conduct. I have documentation of a relationship between a supervisor and subordinate that violates company policy. This situation also involves potential conflicts of interest and abuse of authority. I can provide evidence at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Mark Halverson, Systems Analyst, Level 2. I saved it as a draft. Not yet. First, I needed to gather more evidence, build a case that couldn't be dismissed or swept under the rug. Eliza shifted beside me, mumbling something in her sleep, probably dreaming about her new boyfriend and all the ways they could ruin my career together. They had no idea what they'd just started. Friday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made everything look washed out and depressing. Perfect weather for discovering your life was a lie. Eliza was already gone when I woke up. Another early meeting that probably involved Greg's office and a locked door. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Coffee's made. Have a great day. The heart emoji felt like a particular slap in the face. I got to the office 20 minutes early and made a beeline for Omar's desk. He was already there, nursing what looked like his third cup of coffee and staring at code that probably hadn't worked right since the Clinton administration. We need to talk, I said quietly. Omar looked around the open plan office, then nodded toward the break room. Coffee run? We grabbed our mugs and walked to the far corner where the ancient vending machines hummed loud enough to mask conversation. So, Omar said, stirring sugar into his coffee, Julie's Instagram story. That was... My wife screwing my boss, yeah. Jesus, Mark. I'm sorry, man. That's... He shook his head. What are you going to do? I'd been thinking about that question all night. The obvious answer was confrontation. March into Greg's office, demand explanations, make a scene. But that was exactly what they'd expect from the betrayed husband. Emotional, irrational, easy to dismiss. I need your help, I said instead. You still have admin access to the server logs? Omar's eyebrows shot up. Mark, whatever you're thinking. Nothing illegal. I just want to know when certain people are logging in and out of the system. Public information, technically. Technically? Omar sipped his coffee, considering. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Past month should do it. Cross-reference with badge swipe data if you can access it. I can't officially access badge data, but... Omar grinned. Remember that security audit I did last year? Might still have some backdoor access for testing purposes. This was why I liked Omar. He understood that sometimes the system needed to be bent a little to get to the truth. There's something else, I said. Eliza's been acting weird about her phone lately. Always face down, password protected, takes it everywhere. You want me to clone it? Can you do that? Not legally, but hypothetically, if someone left their phone unattended near a certain USB device for about 90 seconds, Omar shrugged. Hypothetically. We were interrupted by the sound of heels clicking across the office floor. Eliza walked past the break room, coffee in hand, heading for the HR department. She looked radiant this morning, glowing skin, perfect makeup, that satisfied smile of someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. She doesn't look like someone who's feeling guilty, Omar observed. Why should she? As far as she knows, I'm clueless. Greg appeared a few minutes later, straightening his tie and checking his reflection in the glass wall of the conference room. He caught sight of me through the break room doorway and gave me a friendly wave. Morning, Mark. How's that server migration coming along? Right on schedule, I called back. Should have the final report ready by Monday. Excellent. I knew I could count on you. The casual arrogance in his voice made my jaw clench. This was a man who thought he'd already won, who saw me as nothing more than a useful idiot, who'd keep doing good work while he stole my wife and probably my job. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. Omar nearly choked on his coffee. Okay, that's a little intense, even for you. Not literally, but I want him gone. Reputation ruined, career over, wife leaving him. The whole package. Greg's married? 20 years, 2 kids in college. His wife's some kind of socialite who throws charity galas. I'd done my research. She's not going to appreciate learning about his extracurricular activities. Omar was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, you know what? Screw it. I'm in. Just like that? Dude, Greg's been a complete tool to everyone in this department for 3 years. Remember when he took credit for my database optimization project? Or when he restructured the team and gave all the interesting work to his buddies? Omar's voice was getting heated. And now he's messing with your marriage? Yeah, I'm in. We spent the next hour developing what Omar called our intelligence gathering operation. He'd pull the server logs and badge data, looking for patterns that proved Greg and Eliza were spending time together during work hours. I'd focus on financial records and social media evidence. The phone cloning would have to wait for the right opportunity. Around 10 a.m., I got a text from Eliza. Lunch today? That new sushi place? My first instinct was to decline, but then I realized this was perfect. A chance to watch her lie to my face while I knew exactly what she was hiding. Sounds great, I texted back. 12:30? Perfect. Love you. There was that heart emoji again. I spent the morning working on legitimate projects while my brain churned through possibilities. The key was patience. Gather evidence, build the case, then strike when they least expected it. At 11:45, I saw Greg leave the office, checking his phone as he walked. 5 minutes later, Eliza texted me. Rain check on lunch? Emergency meeting just came up. Of course it did. I grabbed my jacket and followed them, staying far enough back to avoid detection. They met at Cafe Luna, a little place 3 blocks from the office. I watched through the window as they sat close together, Greg's hand covering hers on the table. They looked like a couple, comfortable, intimate, completely absorbed in each other. It was probably how Eliza and I had looked 2 years ago, back when she still pretended to care about my day and laughed at my jokes. I took photos with my phone, making sure to capture their faces clearly. Then I went back to the office and sent another update to my growing evidence file. The afternoon dragged by. I kept expecting some kind of emotional breakdown, but instead I felt strangely calm, focused, like I'd finally found a problem worth solving. At 4 p.m., Omar appeared at my desk with a USB drive. Server logs, he said quietly. Very interesting reading. I plugged it in and opened the files. Omar had color-coded everything, bless his obsessive heart. Green for normal activity, yellow for unusual patterns, red for what he called smoking guns. There was a lot of red. Greg and Eliza's login times showed a clear pattern of coordination. When one worked late, so did the other. When one took a long lunch, the other was mysteriously offline too. Most damning were the conference room reservations. They'd been booking private meeting rooms together at least twice a week for the past month. Look at this, Omar said, pointing to a cluster of red entries. Last Tuesday, they were both logged into the system from conference room C for 3 hours. No other attendees listed, no meeting notes filed. What's in conference room C? Projector, whiteboard, comfortable chairs, locks from the inside. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, but pushed it down. This was good. This was evidence. There's more, Omar said. Badge swipe data shows they've been leaving together after hours. Same exit times, down to the minute. I saved everything to my personal drive, then deleted the files from my work computer. This is perfect, Omar. Thank you. What's next? Next, I make some phone calls. That evening, I sat in my car outside Greg's house, a sprawling suburban monument to middle management success. Through the front window, I could see him having dinner with his family. His wife was an elegant woman in her 50s, the kind who probably spent her afternoons volunteering and planning dinner parties. She deserved to know what her husband was doing. I pulled out my phone and started typing an anonymous email. Hey, Mrs. Stanton, you don't know me, but I have information about your husband that I believe you should see. Greg is having an affair with a coworker named Eliza Halverson. I have photographs and documentation if you're interested in the truth. A concerned friend? I didn't send it yet. That would be the nuclear option, saved for when I really needed maximum impact. Instead, I drove home to wait for my lying wife to return from whatever excuse she'd invented for tonight. She came through the door at 9:30, looking slightly disheveled. How was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. Productive, I said. How was your emergency meeting? Oh, budget reviews and compliance stuff, so boring. She was already walking toward the bedroom, phone in hand. I'm exhausted. Think I'll take a bath and go to bed early. Sounds good. I've got some work to finish up anyway. As soon as I heard the bathroom door close, I opened my laptop and sent the draft email to Ms. Evans. Subject line, Urgent. Workplace policy violation. Documentation attached. The first domino had been pushed. Now I just had to wait for the rest to fall. Monday morning brought the kind of chaos that made me grateful I'd gotten to work early. Ms. Evans had clearly received my email because Greg was called into her office at 8:15 a.m. and didn't emerge for over an hour. I watched through the glass walls as he sat across from her desk, his usual confident posture gradually deflating. Ms. Evans was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she had the kind of presence that made grown men confess their sins. She'd been with the company for 15 years and had survived 3 different CEOs by being absolutely ruthless about policy enforcement. When Greg finally walked out, his face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. He went straight to his office and closed the door, something he never did during business hours. Eliza arrived 20 minutes later, looking like she'd spent extra time on her appearance. Designer dress, perfect makeup, the kind of confidence that came from thinking you were untouchable. That confidence lasted exactly until Ms. Evans appeared at her desk. "Eliza, I need to see you in my office, now." I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Eliza's body language change from confused to defensive to panicked over the course of 30 minutes. When she came out, she looked directly at me across the office floor. Our eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. In that moment, I saw her realize exactly who had blown up her carefully constructed lie. She walked over to my desk, her heels clicking against the floor with sharp, angry precision. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Sure. What's up?" "Not here. Conference room B. 5 minutes." I waited exactly 5 minutes, then strolled over to the conference room. Eliza was already there, pacing like a caged animal. "You sent those photos to Evans," she said the moment I closed the door. I reported a policy violation. "Yes." "Don't play dumb with me, Mark. This is my career we're talking about." I sat down in one of the leather chairs and looked at her calmly. "Funny, I thought it was my marriage we were talking about." The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something ugly underneath. Not guilt or remorse, but irritation. Like I was a problem she needed to solve rather than a person she'd betrayed. "Look," she said, switching tactics. "I know how this looks, but it's not what you think." "Really?" "Because what I think is that you've been screwing my boss for at least a month while lying to my face about working late." "It's complicated." "No, it's really not. You're cheating with Greg, who happens to be in a position to make my professional life miserable." I leaned back in my chair. "Actually, that's pretty simple." Eliza sat down across from me, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost young. "I never meant for it to happen," she said softly. "It just developed. Greg and I have been working closely on some projects, and we connected on a professional level, and then you decided to connect on a personal level without mentioning it to your husband." "I was going to tell you." "When? After you got me fired and moved in with him?" Her face flushed. We never talked about you losing your job." But something in her expression told me I'd hit closer to the truth than she wanted to admit. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, standing up. "You're going to move out today. Find a hotel, stay with Julie, I don't care. But you're not sleeping in our bed anymore." "Mark, please. Can't we work this out? Maybe counseling or—" "Counseling," I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. "Eliza, you've been planning this for weeks. The late nights, the secret meetings, the way you've been moving money around in our accounts. This isn't some mistake that happened once. This is a calculated decision you made every single day for a month." She went very still. "What do you mean, moving money around?" "The vacation fund, the joint savings account, little withdrawals here and there, always just under the amount that would trigger a notification to me." I pulled out my phone and showed her the banking app. $1,500 over 6 weeks. "What was it for, Eliza? Nice dinners? Hotel rooms? Gifts for your boyfriend?" "Those were legitimate expenses. Like the $68 charge at Velvet Lounge last Thursday, while you were supposedly working late on compliance reports." She stared at me, and I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. "You've been spying on me," she said finally. "I've been paying attention. There's a difference. This is crazy. You're acting paranoid and controlling, and honestly, it's part of why our marriage has been struggling." There it was. The deflection, the blame shifting, the attempt to make me the villain in her story. Classic manipulation, and probably exactly what she'd been telling Greg to justify their affair. "Our marriage has been struggling because you've been cheating on me with my boss," I said calmly. "Everything else is just noise." Eliza stood up abruptly. "I can't do this right now. I have work to do." "Actually, I don't think you do. Evans looked pretty serious when she called you in. Something about a mandatory review of all your recent decisions and potential conflicts of interest." The color drained from her face. "What did you tell her?" The truth. That my wife and my supervisor have been having an inappropriate relationship that violates company policy and creates obvious conflicts of interest regarding my employment. You're trying to get me fired. I'm trying to protect myself. There's a difference. She headed for the door, then turned back. This isn't over, Mark. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've just started. Actually, Eliza, I think I have a pretty good idea. After she left, I sat in the conference room for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. The conversation had gone better than I'd expected. Eliza was rattled, defensive, making mistakes. And that threat at the end? That was going to be a problem for her, not me. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Omar. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? His response was immediate. Let's do this. The rest of the day was a masterclass in office drama. Word spread quickly that both Greg and Eliza were under review for unspecified policy violations. I watched coworkers huddle in small groups, whispering and speculating. Julie, Eliza's supposed best friend, was notably absent from the supportive gestures I would have expected. Around 3 p.m., Greg emerged from his office and walked over to my desk. His usual swagger was completely gone. Mark, can we talk? Privately? Sure. Your office or mine? Let's take a walk. We went outside to the parking garage, where Greg immediately lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Look, he said, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be, but this thing with Eliza, it's not what you think. Everyone keeps saying that. What exactly do you think I think? That we planned this, that we were trying to hurt you or manipulate the situation at work. He took a long drag. It wasn't like that. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Greg. People make choices. You're right. I made a terrible choice, and I'm sorry. But please don't let this destroy everyone's careers. Eliza's a good employee, and you're one of the best analysts we have. There was something almost pathetic about watching him try to salvage the situation. This was a man who'd built his entire identity around being in control, and now he was begging his subordinate for mercy. I appreciate the apology, I said, but the damage is done. You two made your choices, now you get to live with the consequences. What do you want? A transfer? A promotion? I can make things right. What I want is for you to stay away from my wife and stop pretending this was some innocent mistake. I started walking back toward the building. And Greg, next time you want to destroy someone's marriage, maybe don't document it so thoroughly on social media. That evening, Eliza packed 2 suitcases and left without saying goodbye. She took her laptop, her jewelry, and about half the contents of our joint checking account. She did not take her wedding ring. I found it on the bathroom counter, next to a note that said, I'm staying at Julie's. We need space to figure this out. Space. Like this was some minor disagreement that could be resolved with a little time and perspective. I picked up the ring and examined it in the light. White gold, half-carat diamond, engraved with our wedding date. It had cost me 3 months' salary when I was making a lot less money. Now it just looked like evidence. I dropped it into a small jewelry box and put the box in my desk drawer. Then I opened my laptop and started planning Phase 2. Tuesday brought news that Greg had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The official memo from Ms. Evans was carefully worded, mentioning potential policy violations and conflicts of interest. But everyone knew what it really meant. Eliza was still at work, but she'd been moved to a different department and stripped of her access to personnel files. I watched her from across the office, noting how isolated she looked. Julie wasn't sitting with her at lunch anymore, and the other HR staff were maintaining careful professional distance. Omar appeared at my desk around 10 a.m. with a cup of coffee and a conspiratorial grin. Dude, the gossip mill is going insane. Janet from accounting says she saw Greg cleaning out his office at 6 this morning, and apparently Eliza tried to access the personnel database yesterday and got locked out. Interesting, I said, not looking up from my screen. Also, I may have accidentally left a certain USB device near a certain someone's purse during the staff meeting yesterday. I finally looked at him. Successfully? Let's just say I now have access to some very enlightening text message conversations. Omar handed me a flash drive. The highlights are in a folder marked Research. Some pretty damning stuff in there. I pocketed the drive without looking at it. I'd review the contents at home, away from prying eyes and security cameras. There's something else, Omar said, lowering his voice. I heard through the grapevine that Eliza's been asking around about getting you transferred to a different department. Apparently she told someone in management that the situation was creating a hostile work environment for her. Of course she did. The thing is, Evans shut it down immediately. told her that if anyone was creating a hostile work environment, it wasn't you. That was encouraging. Ms. Evans was clearly taking this seriously, which meant my evidence had been compelling enough to override any attempt at damage control. Around noon, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park after work. Come alone." Greg, apparently, had gotten desperate enough to start making demands. This should be interesting. I spent the afternoon working on legitimate projects while my mind churned through possibilities. Greg was probably going to try intimidation, then bargaining, then maybe begging. Men like him followed predictable patterns when their carefully constructed worlds started falling apart. At 5:30, I drove to Riverside Park and found Greg sitting on a bench overlooking the water. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 2 days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. "Thanks for coming," he said as I approached. "What do you want, Greg?" "I want to make a deal." I sat down on the other end of the bench, maintaining distance. "I'm listening." "I'll resign. Clean slate, no investigation, no formal disciplinary action. In exchange, you back off Eliza. Let her keep her job, her reputation intact." "That's an interesting offer. What makes you think I have any control over what happens to Eliza?" "Come on, Mark. We both know you orchestrated this whole thing. The photos, the timeline, the evidence package you sent to Evans. You've been planning this since you found out." He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit it. "I reported policy violations to HR," I said. "What they do with that information is up to them." Greg turned to face me fully. "Look, I get it. You're angry, you want revenge. But Eliza doesn't deserve to have her career destroyed over this. Doesn't she? She's been lying to her husband, violating company policy, and potentially using her position in HR to benefit her lover. That sounds like someone who deserves consequences." "She made a mistake. She made a series of calculated decisions over several weeks. There's a difference." Greg was quiet for a moment, staring out at the water. "What if I told you this wasn't the first time?" "What do you mean?" "Eliza. This pattern of getting involved with supervisors. It's how she got her last promotion." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You're lying." "David Chen? The guy who used to run HR before Evans took over. Eliza was his assistant for 6 months before he got transferred to the Seattle office, right around the time his wife filed for divorce." "You're just trying to deflect blame. Check the timeline, Mark. Chen left in February. Eliza got promoted to her current position in March. We got married in April." Greg looked at me with something that might have been pity. "She's good at finding men who can help her career. Really good." I wanted to dismiss it as desperate manipulation, but something about the way he said it rang true. The timing, the pattern, the casual way Eliza had inserted herself into my professional life after we started dating. "Even if that's true," I said, "it doesn't change what you did." "No, it doesn't. But it might change how you think about what she did." We sat in silence for a few minutes. I was processing this new information, trying to decide if it was relevant or just another layer of betrayal to deal with. "The offer stands," Greg said finally. "I resign quietly, disappear from both your lives. In exchange, you stop feeding information to HR about Eliza." "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. Evans is meeting with the executive team tomorrow morning. Once they make their decision, there's no going back for any of us." That night, I sat in my empty apartment and reviewed the contents of Omar's flash drive. The text messages between Eliza and Greg were exactly what I'd expected. Romantic, explicit, and completely damning from a professional standpoint. But there were other conversations, too. Messages with Julie about managing the Mark situation. Texts with someone named David Chen, talking about career opportunities and making strategic moves. Greg hadn't been lying. There was a clear pattern here, stretching back years. Eliza wasn't just cheating on me. She was using relationships to advance her career, and I was apparently just the latest in a series of men she'd manipulated. I opened my laptop and started researching David Chen. LinkedIn showed he'd left our company abruptly in February, taking a lateral position in Seattle that was clearly a step down from his previous role. His divorce had been finalized in May. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was uglier than I'd imagined. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. "Can we please talk? I know you're hurt, but we can work through this." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about Greg's offer and what I'd learned about my wife's history. Then I typed back, "Sure. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Cafe Luna." The same place where I'd photographed her with Greg. It seemed appropriate. Her response was immediate. "Thank you. I love you." I didn't reply. I was too busy planning what might be our final conversation. Wednesday evening, I arrived at Cafe Luna 15 minutes early and chose a table with a clear view of the entrance. I'd spent the day thinking about Greg's offer and what I'd learned about Eliza's pattern of behavior. By the time she walked through the door, I'd made my decision. She looked nervous, uncertain, a stark contrast to the confident woman who'd been manipulating her way through office politics for years. She'd dressed carefully for this meeting, conservative blouse, minimal makeup, the kind of outfit designed to project sincerity and vulnerability. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Of course, we're still married, after all." She winced slightly at the reminder. "Mark, I want you to know how sorry I am. About everything. The lying, the sneaking around, the way I handled all of this." "Which part are you most sorry about? The cheating or getting caught?" "That's not fair." "Actually, I think it's a pretty reasonable question, given your history." Eliza went very still. "What do you mean, my history?" "David Chen, your previous supervisor, the one who got transferred to Seattle right around the time you got your promotion." The color drained from her face. "Who told you about David?" "Does it matter? The pattern is pretty clear, Eliza. Find a man in a position to help your career, develop a relationship, leverage that relationship for advancement, then move on when you've gotten what you need." "That's not... It wasn't like that with David." "No? Then what was it like?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Genuine shame. David was lonely. His marriage was falling apart, and he needed someone to talk to. I was just being supportive. And the promotion? That was based on merit. Come on, Eliza, we're past the point of pretending. David Chen recommended you for a position you weren't qualified for, right around the time his wife found out about your support. Then he got quietly transferred before the situation could become a bigger scandal. She didn't deny it. That told me everything I needed to know. "So here's what I'm wondering," I continued. "Was any of it real? Our relationship? The marriage? The whole thing? Or was I just another career move that happened to last longer than usual?" "Of course it was real," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I love you, Mark. I know I screwed up, but you love what I represent. Stability, respectability, someone who won't interfere with your ambitions." I leaned back in my chair. "The problem is, I stopped being useful to your career, didn't I? I'm just a mid-level analyst with no real influence. But Greg? Greg could open doors." Eliza's composure finally cracked. "You think you have me all figured out, don't you? Poor little Mark, the naive husband who never saw it coming." "Actually, that's exactly what I thought until about 24 hours ago. But now I'm wondering if I ever really knew you at all." "You want to know the truth?" Her voice was getting harder, more defensive. "Fine. Yes, I've made strategic choices about my relationships. Yes, I've leveraged personal connections for professional advancement. That's how the world works, Mark. That's how people get ahead. By lying and cheating and destroying other people's lives? By being smart and ambitious and not settling for mediocrity." She leaned forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "You could have been part of it. I tried to help you, to push you toward better opportunities, but you were content to stay in your little cubicle, working on your little projects, never taking any risks. So you found someone who would take risks, someone who could give you what I couldn't. Greg understands ambition. He understands that sometimes you have to make difficult choices to get what you want. Like destroying his marriage, like lying to your husband for months, like recognizing that not all relationships are meant to last forever." There it was, the truth finally. Not some moment of weakness or mistake, but a calculated decision that our marriage had outlived its usefulness. "Well," I said, "I appreciate your honesty." Eliza seemed to realize she'd gone too far. "Mark, I didn't mean—" "No, you did mean it. And you know what? It actually makes this easier." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was open to my email app with a message addressed to Mrs. Helen Stanton. "What is that?" "Evidence, photos, bank records, text messages, timeline documentation, everything I've gathered over the past week, packaged up nicely for Greg's wife. You can't send that." "Actually, I can. The question is whether I will." Eliza stared at the phone like it was a weapon pointed at her head, which in a way it was. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't just manipulate people and move on without any accountability. Please don't send that. Helen deserves to know what her husband has been doing, just like I deserved to know what my wife was doing. If you send that, it will destroy Greg's family, his kids, his reputation, everything. Funny how you didn't think about that before you started your affair. Eliza was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and fear, the tears of someone who'd finally been outmaneuvered. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I want you to resign. Today. Clean out your desk, submit your letter, and disappear from my professional life completely." "I can't do that. This job is my career." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to use it as your personal dating service." I stood up and put on my jacket. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Resign voluntarily, or I send everything to Helen, Ms. Evans, and anyone else who might be interested in your professional conduct." "Mark, please. Oh, and Eliza, I want you moved out of Julie's place and out of the city by the end of the week. Find a new job, start a new life, whatever. But I don't want to see you again." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "One more thing. Greg offered to resign in exchange for protecting you. I turned him down. Thought you should know that your boyfriend was willing to sacrifice his career for yours, even though you clearly wouldn't do the same for him." I left her sitting there, crying into her untouched coffee. The next morning, I arrived at work to find Greg's office empty and Eliza's desk cleared out. Omar met me at the elevator with a huge grin and 2 cups of coffee. "Dude, you missed the show." Eliza came in at like 6 a.m., packed up her stuff, and submitted her resignation to Evans. Then Greg showed up an hour later to do the same thing. Both of them? Both of them. Evans looked like Christmas morning, and her birthday rolled into one. Apparently, voluntary resignations are much cleaner than formal disciplinary actions. We walked to our desks, and I noticed that several coworkers were looking at me with something like respect. Word had clearly gotten around that I'd been the one to expose the affair, and in the strange ecosystem of office politics, that made me someone who shouldn't be underestimated. "So what now?" Omar asked. "Now I get back to work. I've got a server migration to finish." "That's it? No victory lap, no celebration?" I thought about it for a moment. Eliza was gone, Greg was gone, and my life could finally get back to normal. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like cleaning up a mess that never should have happened in the first place. "You know what?" I said. "Let's grab lunch at that new sushi place. My treat." "The one Eliza wanted to take you to?" "That's the one." As we walked toward the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but the calm that comes from knowing you've handled a bad situation as well as anyone could. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won. I hope you're satisfied. E." I deleted it without responding. Some conversations were finally over. The elevator doors closed, and Omar was already talking about his latest project, something involving database optimization and machine learning algorithms. Normal work problems with normal solutions. I was ready to be normal again, but first, sushi, and maybe a beer. It had been a long week, and I'd earned both. The elevator reached the ground floor, and we walked out into the afternoon sunshine. For the first time in months, the future felt like something I could control. My final paycheck from this whole mess wasn't money, it was freedom. Freedom from lies, manipulation, and people who saw relationships as transactions. It was enough.